Okay, let's take a last quick reflection from each of you. And I really do mean fairly quick, ladies and gentlemen. Just a quick reflection on whether we're richer in 10 years' time on your expectation, and if so, how come?
Well, I'm obviously not going to answer that, right? Because I'm... What I would the question that intrigued me was the one about the morality of economics, because in America, anyways, this question is often framed not as an economics question, but as a kind of. And by the way, we really are living in the age of economists, right? I mean, look at this panel, and if we'd done this 5 years ago, we would have been talking about the culture wars, right, and like the theory of evolution and something like that. And in America, we have these economic debates, but we debate them as a form of culture war. Okay, and there's a large school of thought in American politics that insists we need to let the economy fail. To try to prop it up in any way is immoral. It's time for our day of judgment, as I think it's Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky likes to say. It's time for our day of judgment to run, to do some kind of deficit spending program is flouting the will of the Almighty. And there's this very moralistic view of what needs to happen to us, and what needs to happen to us is that we need to get spanked. We've been bad. We've lived beyond our means for too long, and now it's time for us to be punished.
Thomas, thank you very much. Diane.
I think the upstairs questioners were absolutely right, that in the long run, it's innovation and productivity that make us richer. And there's lots of that out there still, and it's not new iPods, but it's graphene and other smart materials, and it's biotechnology, and it's agricultural productivity. And it's also all the innovations that seem really ordinary but make a difference to your life, like tights that don't get wrinkled and socks that don't smell and different flavoured breakfast cereals and all of that stuff. So I don't know if 10 years is the right time horizon, but we will get there. But FDR made a speech when he said you judge your society by how well it does by the poorest members, not how much more it gives to the richest ones, and that's the one we haven't cracked yet.
Sir Martin.
I think all the government effort should be on generating productive activities which employ people. Unemployment is the big enemy, and you do that by simplifying and the restrictions on employing young people in business, particularly small businesses, which are ridiculously onerous right now, by adjusting the planning system to make it much easier to get planning permission for industries which are going to employ people, by helping the infrastructure, doing the infrastructure, making transportation easier, and by reducing tax on small and medium-sized businesses. And all those need to happen.
Anatol.
Well, I agree very much with Diane. I think we will be richer in 10, 15 years' time. I think the key to where the growth will come from is going to be the 5 billion new consumers, increasingly not just producers, that are becoming part of the world economy. They're only 1/10 to 1/5 as rich as we are. They're going to consume more and more. And of course, that will put a lot of strain on the world's resources, but they will be consuming to a large extent products, but also crucially services that we provide. And so it will be catering to the world. But in doing that, we've got to think about what it is that we can provide for the rest of the world. And here I think there is a very controversial issue. The thing that we in Britain have so far over the last, not just 100 years, but over the last 200 or 300 years, been particularly good at providing for the rest of the world is finance, and it is trade, and it is these business services. And I think that will continue to be Britain's most important area of competitive advantage. And the point I would make is that even if finance is a zero-sum game where we're just shuffling pieces of paper with no productive output, if that's what the rest of the world wants us to do, if basically this is a kind of parlor game which the rest of the world wants us to play for it, I think we would be very foolish not to do it. And the last point I would make is that it's easy to say that finance is unproductive and even damaging, but is it actually more unproductive and damaging than making fast cars? Than making Porsches, which kill people, which pollute the environment, and which make a lot of very vulgar noise? I don't think so. I would rather be a banker than a shareholder in Porsche.
Maybe some overlap between Paul
Right.
Schreiner and banker.
Tasteful banker, tasteful banker.
I rather agree with Anatole that we should go on running the casino so long as we don't allow British people to play in it with our money.
Like in Macau, that's right.
On the growth question, I would answer that I don't think we will be richer in 10 years' time. And my reasoning is that although I think the innovation will continue in the ways and in the areas that Diane has described, I think our capacity to mess up our political and financial institutions is currently so great that we will not actually enjoy a net benefit from that process. And I think directly relevant to that, I would like to end by picking up the morality issue once again and saying that in my view, not only is morality not inconsistent with a market economy, it's actually indispensable to making it work. Bear Stearns had a sign over its trading floor that said, "We make nothing but money." And in the long run, the result was it wasn't very successful, even in making that. There should be a lesson there for all of us.
Stephen.
Well, my prediction would be that our absolute growth rates will be significantly lower than they have been over the last 50 or 60 years, which has been an extraordinary period of rising wealth and rising prosperity. Our entitlements overall will have to be cut back, because we've assumed that we have that continuous increase in prosperity at that rate carrying on into the future. It will not happen. As far as global growth is concerned, it will come increasingly from parts of the emerging world, as it has done already over the last 10, 15 years. While we're beating ourselves up about the disappointments in the UK and the US, it's an extraordinary increases in living standards in other parts of the world. Absolutely revolutionary. And my final thought is to use an option we haven't discussed as yet, which is what I like to call the theological option, which basically involves praying for a strong recovery. There are lots of policymakers who've rediscovered God in recent times, and I hope that God exists. Thank you.
My answer to Evan's question is, in 10 years' time, on a per capita basis, I think Britain could be richer than what it is now if, and this is the engine of growth, if it fakes it and then has real gains in productivity by selling to China and India. And this is what I mean. So without exception, with the exception of one country in Europe, no recovery from recession, no growth has ever come from being harder on your own domestic economy. It's always come from making your currency cheaper, selling more via exports, and that gives you artificial competitiveness in the short term. But the key in a very, very competitive world economy is to fake it first and then to make it real in the process, to really increase competitiveness and productivity through innovation, rebalancing the economy, incentivizing value added, making sure Britain doesn't get relegated. And by doing that, then Britain is in a very good position to continue to sell to the fastest growing economies in the world and the emerging middle class, which is coming from China and India. And their potential is immense. Even Indonesia, which is the smallest of these big countries I'm talking about, its population today is what the United States was in 1980. And the United States powered the world economy with that population, with just 200 or so million people. And China and India have over 2 billion together. And I think that's the future. That's been the key to Britain's success, being very global, very internationally oriented, and that provides the best hope or prayer for growth in the short to the medium term.
Last word to Gideon, and then we're out of here.
I don't think I have anything very inspirational to say. I think that the world as a whole will definitely be more prosperous and richer in 10 years' time. Unfortunately, I fear the exception to that is Europe, because of the enormous mess that we're going to have to work out through getting the euro crisis sorted out, plus all the demographic pressures. But I think even Europe in 15 years' time will be okay, but I think we've got a really rough decade ahead.
Right. I'm not sure we cracked it, but we had a very interesting time along the way. I'd love to buy you all dinner. I'm afraid I can't. I will for the gentleman who mentioned my book up there. Otherwise, it just behoves me to say thank you to you for your questions, to Intelligence Squared for organising it. Apologies for finishing a little bit late. We had so much to get in. But above all, to say thank you very much to the panel.